Yoyam Bhajatatma Vitibir Manovachakaya Gunai Svakarmabhi Amayina Kama Dugang Vipankajam Yatadikara Vasitartha Siddhayaha Tam eva yuyang bhajatatma vittibir Manovachakaya gunai svakarmabhi Amayana kama dugang vipankajang Yatadikara vasitartha siddhaya Tameva yuyang bhajatatma vittibhir Manovachakaya gunai sakarmabhi Amayina kama dugang vipankajang Yatadikara vasasarta siddhaya Tameva yuyang bhajatatma vittibhir Manovachakaya gunai svakarmabhi Amayana kama dugang vipankajang Yatadikara vasitartha siddhaya Tameva yuyam bhajatatma vittibhir Manovachakaya gunai sakarmabhi Amayana kama dugang vipankajang Yatadikara vasitartha siddhaya Tameva yuyang bhajatatma vittibhir Manovachakaya gunai sakarmabhi Amayana kama dugang vipankajang Yatadikara vasitartha siddhaya Tameva yuyang bhajatatma vittibhir Manovachakaya gunai sakarmabhi Amayana kama dugang vipankajang Yatadikara vasitartha siddhaya. Ladies. Tameva yuyang bhajatatma vittibhir Manovachakaya gunai svakarmabhi Amayana kama dugang vipankajang Yatadikara vasitartha siddhaya Tameva yuyang bhajatatma vittibhir Manovachakaya gunai sakarmabhi Amayana kama dugang vipankajang Yatadikara vasitartha siddhaya Tameva yuyang bhajatatma vittibhir Manovachakaya gunai sakarmabhi Amayena kamadugang vipankajam yatadikara vasitartha siddhaya tam. Unto him, Eva, certainly, you young, all you citizens, bhajata, worship, atma, own, vitibihi, occupational duty, manaha, mind, vachaha, words, kaya, body, gunaihi, by the particular qualities, sakarma bihi, by occupational duties, amayinaha, without reservation, kamaduga, fulfilling all desires, angri pankajam, the lotus feet, yata, as far as, adhikara, ability, avasita artha, fully convinced of one's interest, siddhayaha, satisfaction. Translation and purport by Srila Prabhupada. Prithu Maharaj advised his citizens, engaging your minds, your words, your bodies, and the results of your occupational duties, and being always open-minded, you should all render devotional service to the Lord. According to your abilities and the occupations in which you are situated, you should engage your service at the lotus feet of the Supreme Personality of Godhead with full confidence and without reservation. Then you will surely be successful in achieving the final objective in your lives. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. It's quite a long purport, 2 pages long, so bear with us. As stated in the 18th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, Sarkarmanata Abhyarcha, one has to worship the Supreme Personality of Godhead by one's occupational duties. This necessitates accepting the principle of 4 varnas and 4 ashrams. Prithu Maharaj therefore says, Kunai Sukarma Bihi. This phrase is explained in the Bhagavad Gita. Chaturvanyam maya shrishtam gunakarma vibhaga shaha. The 4 castes, Brahmins, Kshatriyas, Vaishyas and Shudras, are created by the Supreme Personality of Godhead according to the material modes of nature and the particular duties discharged in those modes. A person who is situated in the mode of goodness is certainly more intelligent than others. Therefore he can practice the Brahminical activities, namely speaking the truth, controlling the senses, controlling the mind, remaining always clean, practicing tolerance, having full knowledge about one's self-identity, and understanding devotional service. In this way, if he engages himself in the loving service of the Lord as an actual Brahmana, his aim to achieve the final interest of life is attained. Similarly, the Kshatriya's duties are to give protection to the citizens, to give all of his possessions in charity, to be strictly Vedic in the management of state affairs, and to be unafraid to fight whenever there is an attack by enemies. In this way, a Kshatriya can satisfy the Supreme Personality of Godhead by his occupational duties. Similarly, a Vaishya can satisfy the Supreme Godhead by properly executing his occupational duties, engaging himself in producing foodstuffs, giving protection to cows, and trading if necessary when there is an excess of agricultural production. Similarly, because Shudras do not have ample intelligence, they should simply engage as workers to serve the higher statuses of social life. Everyone's aim should be to satisfy the Supreme Personality of Godhead by engaging his mind in thinking always of Krishna, his words in always offering prayers to the Lord or preaching about the glories of the Lord, and his body in executing the service required to satisfy the Lord. As there are 4 divisions within one's body, the head, the arms, the belly, and the legs, similarly, human society, taken as a whole, is divided into 4 classes of men according to their material qualities and occupational duties. Thus, the Brahminical or intelligent men have to execute the duty of the head. The Kshatriyas must fulfill the duty of the arms. The Vaishya class must fulfill the duty of the belly, and the Shudras must fulfill the duty of the legs. In executing the prescribed duties of life, no one is higher or lower. There are such divisions as higher and lower, but since there is actually a common interest to satisfy the Supreme Personality of Godhead, there are no distinctions between them. The question may be raised that since the Lord is supposed to be worshipped by great demigods like Lord Brahma, Lord Shiva, and others, how can an ordinary human being on this planet serve him? This is clearly explained by Prithu Maharaj by the use of the word yatadhikara, according to one's ability. If one sincerely executes his occupational duty, that will be sufficient. One does not need to become like Lord Brahma, Lord Shiva, Indra, Lord Chaitanya, or Ramanujacharya, whose capabilities are certainly far above ours. Even a Shudra, who is in the lower stage or lowest stage of life, according to the material qualities, can achieve the same success. Anyone can become successful in devotional service, provided he displays no duplicity. It is explained here that one must be very frank and open-minded. Amayinaha. To be situated in a lower status of life is not a disqualification for success in devotional service. The only qualification is that whether one is a Brahmin, Kshatriya, Vaishya, or Shudra, he must be open, frank, and free from reservations. Then, by performing his particular occupation or duty, under the guidance of a proper spiritual master, he can achieve the highest success in life. As confirmed by the Lord himself, Sriyo Vaishyas tata Shudras tepi yanti param gatim. It does not matter what one is, whether a Brahmin, Kshatriya, Vaishya, Shudra, or a degraded woman. If one engages himself seriously in devotional service, working with body, mind, and intelligence, he is sure to be successful in going back home, back to Godhead. The Lord's lotus feet are described here as Kama Dugangri Pankajam, because they have all power to fulfill the desires of everyone. A devotee is happy even in this life, because although in material existence we have many needs, all his material needs are satisfied. And when he at last quits the body, he goes back home, back to Godhead without a doubt. The end of the purport. I'll just read the verse again. Prithu Maharaj advised the citizens, engaging your words, your minds rather, your words, your bodies, and the results of your occupational duties, and being always open-minded, you should all render devotional service to the Lord. According to your abilities and the occupations in which you are situated, you should engage your service at the lotus feet of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, with full confidence and without reservation. Then you will surely be successful in achieving the final objective in your lives. Om Jnana Timrandasya Hinanjana Shlakaya Chakshur Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Reminded me of a conversation which Srila Prabhupada had in 1968 in Montreal, 67 or maybe 68. And Prajumna Prabhu, who was Srila Prabhupada's kind of Sanskrit, eventually became his Sanskrit editor. Probably used to call him Panditji. He was quite studious and very learned. And he asked Srila Prabhupada that, because one of the qualities of a devotee is expert. So Prabhupada asked Pradyumna asked Srila Prabhupada exactly what do we mean by expert? Most people think you're expert at driving, expert at cooking, expert at whatever it is, gardening, farming, whatever, which can also, of course, be applied. But Prabhupada said expert means just like a baby calf immediately goes to the mother and drinks the milk. It doesn't need any, very rarely, maybe occasionally, but generally speaking, the calf immediately knows what to do. It goes to the mother and to her teats and drinks the milk as soon as possible. That's the general situation. They say just like a person, maybe they're very good at making flower garlands, they should just make flower garlands. You should imitate flower garlands. If you don't know how to drive, don't drive. It's not that we have to learn something. We may have to in our present world situation or for the sake of necessity. But in normal situations, one doesn't have to learn something which is contrary or not according to one's nature. So expert means to know what one's nature is, to act accordingly. And then he went on to discuss the subject pretty much of today's class, today's purport, where Srila Prabhupada is mostly stressing on the importance of the Varna Ashram system, the 4 Varnas, or the 4 occupations, and the 4 ashrams, orders of life, social orders. Because for most people, as we see in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says to Arjuna that even if you are in knowledge, even if you are above the mode, still, one who's in this world should still act accordingly to show others proper behavior, how to perform their duties properly, and to take their duties seriously. So they still act. They don't. Sometimes, of course, they do detach themselves entirely from the world around us. But those who are in a position of preachers or leaders, they act accordingly. They show the example. As we mentioned the other day, Arjuna was concerned about what causes a man to act sinfully, even if it's against his own nature, as if forced by some other kind of force. Krishna says it's lust only. He's referring to what causes a person not to perform his natural duty, according to Varna and Ashram. And Krishna says it's lust only. In other words, lust, the desire to want to enjoy separately from the order of the Lord. Varna Ashram system, Prabhupada mentions in the purport Chaturvarnya Mayashristam, Guna Karma Vibhagasha, is given by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. It's not a man-made system. We may make our own political arrangements, our own political philosophies and so on. There has to be some system. Maybe to some degree it's based upon the traditions passed down from ages past, but in general it's made according to our own interpretations, according to the modes of nature which people are driven by. They make various rules and regulations, directions, divisions of life. Mostly now when the modes of passion and ignorance are predominant, there's not much goodness. So people are very passionate in their work, in their occupations, and even in their activities, their recreation, what they do with the fruits of their work. They're very passionate to get more and more fruits beyond and above necessity. And they're still not satisfied. That's the unfortunate situation, you could say. Generally people are still not satisfied despite having ample food, ample clothing, ample sense objects, etc., etc. Maybe a well-paid job in society. They're still not satisfied because they're missing the point. And even in Varna Ashram, it's not just Varna Ashram. We can give an example. Duryodhana, for instance, was a very expert manager. He could organize very well, as good as anyone, as good as the Pandavas. He could organize, a good manager, but he wasn't a devotee. Therefore, the purpose of his system was materialistic. It wasn't for the pleasure of the Lord. As we hear earlier on in the Bhagavatam, in the first canto, Takshu Krishna Atak Kumbir Dvijashveshta Varnashrama Vibhagashta Spunishitasya Dharmasya Sangsitir Haritoshna. So the purpose of the Varnas and ashrams, of all the occupational duties one performs, is Sangsitir Haritoshna, is to please the personality of Godhead. That's the purpose of the Varna ashram. It's a God-given system. And if we follow that system properly, and it's not even just about performing one's natural occupation, it's about offering, as we heard here, offering the results of one's work in the service of the Lord. Whatever we do, yat karoshi dashnasiya yahusi vidasiya, should be done as an offering unto the personality of Godhead. That should be the goal of our works. The goal of our works is not karmendriyani samyutta. It's not to engage in sense gratification. That's not the goal. Is to inquire into the nature of the absolute truth. That should be the goal of our lives. And our activities should be, let's say, focused on that purpose of understanding our relationship with God. The Varnashram system was devised like that, to try to facilitate whoever one was, whether man or woman, whatever position in life one's in, Brahmin, Kshatriya, Vaishya, Shudra, married or single, it doesn't dictate in the sense of one's absolute objective. As we heard the other day, there are two svadharmas, one is the material, one is the spiritual. But the highest purushartha, or the highest value in life, is Krishna Pramartha Mahan, said to be the fifth goal of life, to understand the absolute truth in full. That should be the goal of all work. Otherwise, it's described dharmasya samsthanistita pumsam vishvaksena katasya nupariyani diyudim shramevi kevalam. It's a shramevi kevalam, it's a waste of time. Simply acting piously may elevate one to a higher plane, but it doesn't necessarily bring one to the spiritual realm. Of course, one is on the spiritual path, may be cultivating, or may be in the mode of goodness, or cultivating the mode of goodness, and that's very favorable. But that's not the objective goal. It's just a particular covering which we happen to have now, a particular dress. So those in the mode of goodness are generally, of course, inclined towards Brahminical activities. Education, teaching, learning, guiding, etc. And those who are very much in the mode of passion, like to manage and control everything. And those who are kind of in mixed modes, passion, must be passion there, with a bit of ignorance, they're very much the Vaishyas, or the economic basis of society, economic basis. And those who don't really have much, let's say, initiative to organize or manage or educate, and not very good at, production and so on, which is the vast majority of the people in society today or in the past. It's always the same. It doesn't matter. They engage in their occupation of service, assisting the others who have a little bit more brain substance to organize society or produce or understand the ultimate goal of life. And they work cooperatively together, just like the body has a head, arms, belly, and legs. They all work cooperatively together. In this way the body functions nicely. If they start to quarrel, if there's envy between the parts, then you have a big problem. The legs, of course, that doesn't happen in one sense. But we do see sometimes that the legs in the body stop functioning, or when the mind gives a control, they don't follow it, they act in a different way. Some diseases are like that. You give one direction to the limb, but it acts differently. There's some defect in the system, I don't know what they call it, the system of disseminating directions. That's called. And the limb acts in a different way, or it just doesn't work at all. So then you have a problem from the bodily point of view. But in Vedic society, everything was kept together by a whole. It wasn't just a matter of choosing one's position, acting accordingly, but there was elevation, diving, Daivi Varnashram. Daivi Varnashram means God-centered. When everything's centered, probably give the example, when you have let's take a pond of water, a reservoir of water, and one throws into the lake or the pond many stones. And each and every stone is a center unto itself. It considers itself the center. So there's friction. There's clashing between the waves emanating or coming out from each stone. And you have a lot of friction. It's kind of like the world today with many different dogma philosophies, different religions with their own dogmas, etc., people with their own, interpretations and what have you. Everyone's different, and unless there's some unifying factor or some strong leadership which may establish a unifying factor, like it or not, then there's a somewhat, you could say, chaotic situation. And then you have leaders, and there's so many different nations of the world, like hundreds of nations, with many of them are very much, opposites in terms of philosophy, political philosophy, practically speaking, or just simply don't agree on so many things and aren't able to work cooperatively together. You get another clash on that level. Each one is their own. They want their own independence, their own control and everything. It's nothing unusual in the material world, but it's not the purpose of the material world. So you get clashes there amongst religions without understanding the common reality between at least, let's say, original teachings and the real goal of all of the teachings. And then you get clashes there as well. You get clashes in sport, you get clashes in just about everything in society. There's conflict, just about, especially in Kali Yuga. It's the age of conflict, it's the age of quarrel, it's the age of hypocrisy. The Daiva Varnashram system is based upon truthfulness. Now, truthfulness is not just, whatever, some small thing. That's one form of truthfulness. Did you fold up your blanket? The kid says, oh, yeah. You can say that's untruthful, but it's not what's really meant here. It means understanding what one's quota means. Ishavasya sarvam yatkincha jagatcha jagatena chatena bundita magridakasha svidanam. It means understanding our quota. In the Ishopanishad, it states there, of course, that everything that is animate or inanimate, whatever it is, in other words, is the property of the Supreme Lord, Isha. Ishavasyam. It's his property. And everything should be utilized according to his will. And the living entity should know what is their quota and not try to usurp or not try to take others' quotas. And that interpreted in terms of Ishavasyam society means literally one should play one's part and not imitate the part of another. But the tendency in the modern age is not, there's inevitably speaking some kind of, we could say, like water finding its natural base. There's some degree of that. One oscillates or veers towards things which you're more inclined towards. But there's a big factor in this Kali Yuga which outweighs practically all other considerations in many cases, and that is money. Because of the artificial monetary system and everything that goes along with it, power and prestige and job and this and that, there is a tremendous emphasis on money, irrelevant of one's nature. In other words, if one said, not in every case, but in many cases, if you ask your son, if you have one, what would you like to do when you get older, son? And my parents asked me that. And if I said, I want to be a dustbin man, I want to be a garbage man, I want to be a trash cleaner, they won't be very inspired. What do you think, Hakana? Maybe your parents are different, your mother is anyway. She's a very pious lady. But in general, it would be, oh my God, forget that, Go to school, get some qualification, get a degree, become a doctor, do something useful. But that's very useful, being a garbage man. Probably more useful than most things that people do. But it doesn't have the prestige. There's a lot of prestige involved. False ego. Huh? I mean, my parents, they wanted me to become something. Why? Because my cousins, one became a doctor, one became a vet, this, that, the other. So they wanted me to become something as well. So there was a lot of encouragement there to become something which has a bit of a name to it, not just working in office 9 to 5, and this is whatever it is. Speak of being a garbage cleaner, garbage can cleaner, or even a farmer was didn't have very much prestige in many societies nowadays. It doesn't. What's that? That's like for idiots or something, Of course, it's all mechanical nowadays. You've got to have a degree in computer science to be a farmer nowadays, practically. But otherwise it's like dumb people or something do that. You've got to become now IT. Even in India, marriages are often based upon what occupation you've got and what's the latest fashion. If you're not an IT specialist, I'm not going to marry my daughter to you. And maybe an engineer. There's a lot of that going around too. Very much. Not so much on the real purpose of married life. Today we have a marriage ceremony this morning, I believe. It's not so much the purpose of married life, which is really to work together to go back to Godhead, to help each other, to cultivate our pure loving service to the Lord. And not so much of that there, ever. Even amongst devotees, it's not really emphasized very much. But that is the purpose of all the varnas and ashrams, is Daivi varna ashram, to go back to Godhead. But that's hardly mentioned. The leaders have not got that in mind. Even if they are, like Duryodhana, following the varna ashram in the mechanical sense of the term, they're not following in its real sense, or its spiritual sense, or its objective goal, which is samsiddhi toshna, to serve the personality of Godhead, or to please the personality of Godhead. That's the life of Varnashram. Otherwise it's just another system. Maybe good, maybe in the mode of goodness, or leading to the mode of goodness, helping people to elevate to the mode of goodness, but it keeps people in the material modes. Goodness, passion, ignorance, material modes. So to rise above that, there has to be diving. In other words, leadership has to be enlightened leadership, not just good leadership, but enlightened. That's why in many cases we see the cases. King Vena, of course, he wasn't good at perhaps even the material side of it, but he was good at certain things, and he had some pretty bad qualities. And so the Brahmins got rid of him because he was actually, causing harm to the citizens. Kshatriya means the leader, Kshatriya of society. Generally, Krishna or teachings are given to Kshatriyas because they're the ones who have to execute it. They're very learned also, very powerful executors. So they would receive the knowledge or the teachings, and they would have to implement it in society for the welfare of the citizens. So we just heard in the purport some of the responsibilities of Alpha A Kshatriya. One is to protect. It doesn't just mean protecting in terms of the body. It means protecting from fear, protecting from, the material, let's say, coverings of becoming overwhelmed, protecting from birth and death. It means a lot more than just protecting if someone's being attacked. And that's there, of course it's there also, but it's not the primary protecting from harm of all kinds, spiritual, mental, physical. Great responsibility to be a Kshatriya, and therefore there's a lot of training for Kshatriyas, a lot of care taken in who is in that position, because they have a big responsibility. Another aspect of their responsibility, as we heard, is they're very charitable, extremely charitable. They give everything away. We have the example of Maharaj Shibi, who was a great king, and he was renowned for his charitable nature. And obviously, you could say his claim to fame in one sense. So the demigods tested him one day when Indra disguised himself as a pigeon and Agni as an eagle or something like that. And the eagle was chasing the pigeon, and the pigeon flew into the court of Maharaj Shibi and took shelter of Maharaj Shibi and asked for protection. Yes, even lower creatures are to be protected by the Kshatriya. It's not just humans. And so the king assured him, don't worry, I will give you protection, I'm here, do not fear. A few minutes later, the eagle flew in looking for the pigeon. Oh, king, you are the king of the land. This pigeon is my food, you have to please satisfy my needs also. So a little dilemma, the king faced a dilemma. He had to satisfy the request of both the pigeon and the eagle. There was a bit of a dilemma, you could say. And it's like that many times in society. You satisfy one, you dissatisfy the other. It's not very easy to satisfy everyone. Abraham Lincoln said you can satisfy all the people some of the time, or some of the people all the time, but you can never satisfy all the people all of the time. Material statement, but it's a fact. As long as we're under the modes of nature, that will be, because there's differentiation, there's self-centered perspectives, there's selfish agendas and so on involved. Egotists, false ego. So the pigeon was, what's to say, probably a little frightened at that point in time, and the eagle was a little bit, concerned, what's going on. So the king then said, well, he had to satisfy both. So he begged the eagle, please, will you accept my own flesh instead of the pigeon? If I cut my own flesh to the weight of the pigeon, will you accept it? So the eagle said, okay then. So the king started cutting off his own flesh. The eagle sat on one side of the scale, and the pigeon sat on one side of the scale, and the king put his flesh on the other side of the scale. He cut all the flesh off of his legs, then off his thighs, and different parts of his body, and then off one arm. And literally there was nothing left. Basically just bones. There was no flesh left, and organs. And the king then, because the pigeon was still heavier than whatever flesh he put on there, the pigeon was still heavier. So then the king put himself on the scale. You eat everything. I'm yours. At that point, the demigods were convinced that this king is really qualified. And then they revealed themselves and blessed him. So he became renowned to this very day in Vedic history, at least, as a great king who was performing his duty fully, so charitable like that. So different things. And he's also supposed to manage society nicely, not chaotically, and he's supposed to be, in a way which people are. Very important duty of management is the king has to see that all the citizens are engaged according to their propensity. And if they're not, he has to act on it. He has to do the needful. And there's no room for lazy people in society. They have to be fully engaged, one way or another. As a Brahmin, they have to do their duty. As a Kshatriya, Vaishya, or Shudra. There is, of course, a large number of people who are called Anchijas. They're outside that system. Various occupations may be there too. But they have their place in society. Maybe hunters, various things, cobblers and what have you. They're called Anchijas. They still have a part to play in society, but they're not considered in the same league of responsibility that the Shudras, Vaishyas, Kshatriyas and Brahmins have in terms of occupational duty and objective goal of life. And nowadays, generally speaking, very degraded society, Varna Shankara, everyone's born in mixed caste, everything's a mess, people don't know what they to do. One day you feel like you're a Kshatriya, the next day I want to be a Brahmin, next day you think about doing business, the next day you think I'm useless at everything, I'll just be a Shudra. The next day you're really in the mode of ignorance and don't want to do anything. It's a real mess, in society. It's not guiding people. There's no enlightened leaders, there's no Rajarishis amongst society nowadays. Most of the leaders themselves are Kalo Shudra Sambhava. They're maximum Shudra, or less practically. They don't know the goal of life, they're not honest, they're not well charitable. Obviously there's exceptions or degrees of exceptions, but in general there's no enlightened leadership, and there's hardly anyone who's leading society based upon the God-given directives. And thus people are misled, and society's in chaos. The Srila Prabhupada wanted, it's like a big tall order, we could say, a difficult one to get around, but Srila Prabhupada wanted us to establish within the society of Krishna consciousness a structure based on Varnashram. What that is and how that's to be done. Some devotees have different opinions on that, and there are different interpretations, especially Kali Yuga. We find Lord Chaitanya didn't emphasize it at all, practically speaking. He wasn't against it, obviously, but he did hardly emphasize it. One time in a conversation, Hari Sori asked Prabhupada, when Prabhupada was talking about the importance of Varna Ashram. And Hari Sori Prabhupada said, well, did Lord Chaitanya, didn't he say this wasn't practical? In this age, just chant Hare Krishna, that's all you have to do. Prabhupada said, yes, but you can't just chant Hare Krishna. You know, we're so much, say, driven by other drives for material desires and name and fame and what have you. This sort of structure is required to engage people. There's one interesting thing which many of us may have experienced in life. When you are situated more appropriately according to one's varna and ashram, you feel more satisfied. You feel, even without God consciousness, one will feel more peaceful and more satisfied. One will feel more confident, one will not feel so envious of others, etc., because one's more satisfied at home. That's another angle of, let's say, the duty of the kings, the duty of leaders of society is to facilitate this for people so they can be more peaceful and not feeling so agitated about what others have got. In our modern society, envy often becomes a very prominent feature that someone's got something, and the whole philosophy of communism is based upon it. And it's got its, you could say it's obvious reasons, misused by the capitalists, by the, whatever, the kings and so on, misusing their position. So it's born out of negativity, not out of positivity. But in of itself, it's a kind of envy. They've got it, we don't have it. We should have it, why should they have it? And there's a lot of that in society today, very prominent. And it'll always be there unless people are properly situated, and unless they have some higher kind of happiness, or satisfaction from their occupation at least. But in a modern society it's not so rare. A survey was done in America some decade or two ago, and they found that over 90% of people said they really did not like the job they were doing. More than 90%. So that speaks for itself. People are not very happy in what they're doing, so how can we expect, without happiness, how can we expect any peace in society? People are disturbed, they're in want. They may not be in want of food, but they're in want of something else because they're not satisfied. And so forth, they do all sorts of things to obtain it. And they may even fight with each other to obtain it. So people are, in this way, not at all happy. If one makes the Samsiddhi Toshan, the Supreme Lord, happy through occupational duties, then automatically one will feel happy. As watering the root of a tree, the whole tree is nourished. Feeding the stomach, the whole body is nourished. So that's the secret. God-centered society, this Ishavastyam society, is essential for most people. Very few people can transcend a system where they're implicated, caught up, indoctrinated, blinded by whatever you want to call it, system of life as being the ultimate goal or the only purpose of life is to be a good guy, have a family, get a job, etc. It's not likely to lead to any kind of spiritual benefit at all. Maybe some good or bad karma, but that's not the goal of human life. We're not karma mimamsas. We just live our lives just to try to be good and act properly according to the Varna ashram. The devotee lives their lives to try to please Krishna. It's love. And love is not about pleasing ourselves, it's about pleasing, that's the propensity. Every living entity has a loving propensity. And whatever we may believe or not believe, that loving propensity is there, covered over or not covered over, It is there, and we generally try to exercise it in the material world, and it results inevitably in frustrations, because every object of our love has its beginning and an end. And that's on the spiritual platform. Spiritually, there's eternality of love. And we were discussing last night, nectar of devotion, how this loving propensity is in everyone, and how it's fully satisfied when it's connected to the Supreme Lord. He's the reservoir of love. He's the object of love. He himself is love personified, you could say. So connecting that little propensity, or tiny little fragments will have a similar quality, but connecting that to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, then we get satisfaction. So this is the same like when we throw many pebbles in the lake, many friction is there. But when we throw one pebble in, there's unity. Even though we may be on different circles, emanating or coming out from that one pebble, there's no friction. There's no friction. Of course, they hit the shore, you could say there's friction. That means if we hit the material modes of nature. But in reality, in spirituality, there's no friction. There's harmony. There's compatibility. There's unity and diversity. We may be different. We're on a different circle. We have a different nature. We have a different characteristic. In the material world, these are obvious. In the spiritual world, it's also there. Different devotees have different flavors, different rasas with the Lord. But there's no conflict of opinion. Everyone has the same objective goal. That's the secret of Varnashram system. One goal, to satisfy the Supreme Lord. And the Brahmins especially, their duty is to constantly be focusing everything on that purpose, educating others to remember that's the goal of life. Do what you're doing for the pleasure, tasmat saveshu kalashu mamanushya yudhicharmyapatamanopadya mame vaishishu shamshu. That all of our activities, whatever our thoughts are, whatever our activities, they should all be for the service of the Lord. We should remember the Lord in all of what we do. It should be the goal. And that's the direction of society. Educating, guiding, facilitating everyone's God consciousness. That's the primary duty of a Kshatriya. Working under the direction of the Brahmins. Facilitating the Vaishyas to provide the means of sacrifice. The Kshatriyas have to perform yajna, sacrifice for Vishnu, also very important. Part of their management or their guidance of society. They'll engage the Brahmins in performing the yajna, but they facilitate it and make sure it goes on and make sure it's done properly so that people will benefit. Even though they're in ignorance, by working in such a structure, the persons in ignorance will also get benefited because they're assisting in the sacrifice for the pleasure of Lord Vishnu. This is the Varnashram system, the Daivi Varnashram. And that is one of the things that Prabhupada wanted. We're not just, that's not all, of course, within that system. Then Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu, glorifying the Supreme Personality of God, it is prominently emphasized on all stages and at all levels and in all ashrams. But when one's properly situated, it's a lot more peaceful, a lot more easier, as Prabhupada said, to chant the holy name. But we're not properly, we're always disturbed, we're always envious or hankering or lamenting if we're not properly situated. Always that will be there. But being more, as Prabhupada said, yes, he said the Hari story, but even our own, and then Hari story said, well, is that to show the public? Prabhupada said, no, for our own society. Even our own Brahmins cannot even attend Mangal Arati. What's the use? They can't even attend Mangal Arati. They can't even get up in the morning. So what's the use of Brahmin? What is this? Lusty, greedy for eating more, sleeping long hours, watching nonsense, eating nonsense, doing nonsense. What is this? This is not Brahmin, this is Shudra. And it's meant for our own society, Prabhupada said. What to do? We know what's the situation, but to adjust it is not easy. Not an easy thing at all. Even Shiva Maharaj, I mean, he'd been preaching in Hungary maybe 30, 40 years. Wonderful project, very organized, you could say. He said, maybe one devotee is a Brahmin on the whole community. Although many are doing deity worship, the qualities are not really there. Brahmin is one by quality, not by activity, but by quality of work. Kshatriya is mixed, quality and what they do. Vaishya is solely what they do. They farm, they trade, they look after cows. There's no mention of their characteristics. They work under the Kshatriyas, and everything's meant to be in that line. The Shudras just help everybody else. But the Brahmins, there's no mention of what they do. It's purely the character of their, or the quality of their consciousness. That's the main thing for a Brahmin. So, Hare Krishna, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Any questions or comments? So we're all eager now to fill our bellies, especially the Brahmins. Greedy Brahmins, we want to fill our bellies. We're always eager for donations, always eager to get praised. That's the qualification of a Brahmin, isn't it? One who's expert at filling the belly, expert at, I'm a Brahmin, don't ask me to do anything, I'm a Brahmin. You should serve me. You do a bit of puja as long as you pay me for it, or give me some dakshini, some yogya, Don't know what really is going on, but as long as they pay me, it's okay. I've been, remember my first exposure to this. I went to a Hindu temple in Coventry in England. The Pujari was sleeping with a cat in his bed, and without bathing, he would go on the altar. I'm watching television half the time. Yes?
The last few sentences that you were saying is very profound. I understand that a person is born with the guna and karma. So this guna and karma is like his inborn nature and quality. So can like we said, a leader is born not made, something like that. So
a leader is born where?
No, I'm saying like you were saying that the leader is born not made.
Born, not made.
Yeah. So like this Brahmin quality, when they are born, when it's birth, the quality is already in them, or can you actually develop this quality along your life?
Qualities are developed by association. So, of course we have this is a big subject matter, and it covers many areas, we could say. And it's one of the challenges, which we all have in many ways, is we're born, we've got our karma, we've got our nature. Our nature is also a result of association. It's another form of karma. We're talking about material nature. Inclinations, tendencies, but attractions to various things. We're born in a certain place, time and circumstance, family because of our karma. And generally that family, again, there's many other factors involved, but this generalization will be according to bring out those particular tendencies. Now in this Kali Yuga, those tendencies are usually very mixed. They're not so black and white as they may have been in previous ages, more complicated. But the same principle is there. Your karma dictates that, and desire, of course, but primarily karma is there, which determines the living entity's birth in a particular place or a particular family, poor, rich, educated, whatever. Family, or family it happens to be, different, whatever, color, and even in religion it's mixed in religion because it's still karma, but it's got some religious inclination also. Everything is due to one's past lives, in other words. And you're born there. So you're one of the individuals responsible for where they're born. We have a tendency to blame others. Even amongst devotees, this is a tendency. We blame, because this person, this happened to me, right? Well, there's an element of truth there, but it's not the real truth because we're responsible for being in that situation. It's something which was from previous. It's like Prabhupada. One time one man was criticizing him like anything, and Prabhupada said, maybe for our benefit, I must have hurt him in my last lifetime. You know, most of us don't necessarily take that responsibility so much on board. We like to blame others, blame circumstances, etc. Not realizing man is the architect of his own misfortune as well as his own fortune. We're responsible for that. Now that doesn't, let's say, make everything like just everything's up to providence, there's no responsibility in the human life. There is. So to a large degree what you say is correct. That you're born with these tendencies due to your karma and desire from previous numerous lifetimes. You come into this lifetime, and even if you realize that, you don't blame anyone, you just karma amongst the philosophy basically. But there's more to it than that. There is an arrangement supposed to be made, association supposed to be there to evoke a change. To evoke change, to elevate people to a higher level of consciousness. By association. Everything is developed by association and it continues to develop by association. So society should be arranged in such a way as to give good association to people. A person goes to prison because they're a criminal, and the job of the prison is not just an atonement. A prison is not just a place to punish them where they're kept out of the way of citizens or whatever it may be. It's meant to also reform. It's meant to. By proper association. We know as a fact there's some degree of success, but it's not very high degree. People don't change very easily. Very difficult. Habits don't change very easily, even amongst aspiring devotees. But with all that said and done, it's still not a disqualification because the real essence of Lord Chaitanya's movement wasn't so much about changing, but about engaging, knowing how to engage according to your condition, even if you are a thief, even if you are whatever one may be, but somehow or another trying to engage it. Look at how the temple in Sri Rangam was built. If you've ever read the story of Ramanujacharya and the construction of the Ranganath temple, we're not proposing you do that as an exception. It wasn't built by Ramanujacharya, it was built by a previous acharya in that line. But he engaged all kinds of expert thieves, robbers, criminals in raising the funds to build the temple. Then he got them all and drowned them all in the lake. Pretty extreme, huh? If you look at it from a mature point of view, everything sounds absolutely horrible. And it is, from a mature point of view, you could say, this is disgusting. But that most famous temple, practically amongst the Ramacharyas, was built like that. It wasn't built by, pious people giving donations from their well-earned, earnings. It was, by nefarious means. Nobody was giving. The only reason he did that was the people were not giving. They weren't helping. So he took that on board for the Lord. But they were all delivered. All those rogues and thieves were all delivered. Because they worked for the Lord. They didn't know or not know, but they were working for the highest cause, you could say. So to engage people accordingly. Now you have to look at the law of the land, so we don't do that sort of thing necessarily at all. Of course we don't. But the principle is there. We engage people. You go on the street. You went to Raja Udi yesterday. Now you probably went to some butchers, some guys dealing with all kinds of things, intoxicants, and they give a donation and use it in Krishna service. It's a principle, similar principle. They don't know they're giving to Krishna. They don't really, maybe they're thinking I get some good karma, or just to get rid of you. Sometimes they give a donation. I've had that several times. I was on Harinam, Sankaras on my own, doing Harinam in nearby city near Mayapur some years ago. I remember one guy came at a restaurant. He said, "Look, mate, take this €2 and buzz off, will you, please? Get out of here, you're disturbing my customers." He paid me to go away. I went away. Whatever their motive is, some or another, they're getting some good fortune. And that will have, although you say it's not necessarily the modes of nature in this case, because they've engaged in the service of the Lord then directly acts. That's why Prabhupada says when a person does any degree of service, Krishna directly gets involved. It's not just karma. He directly gets involved. That person has no eligibility, but he starts to give them eligibility then to, rise up. Because they gave it knowingly, unknowingly. A donation, which if it's used in the service of the Lord, they get the benefit for that. They get purified. But in normal society, the whole society is geared to some degree towards that elevation and change of consciousness. It's a very slow process, the Varnashram system. In one sense, you could say, lifetimes. You maybe take birth in the mode of goodness in your next life because you follow the mode of goodness leaders. And then you may be a Brahmin, and like that it goes on. But as far as Lord Chaitanya's movement, it can happen instantaneously by chanting the holy name purely. And then all the prarabdhas, all the reactions to one's sinful life, including one's kotas and bijas, one's tendencies, one's desires, etc., that can all change by that association and by the mercy of the Lord. The heart can change. You have a realization. You no longer have an interest in that. You have a higher interest. So that's the spiritual side. On the practical side, it's practical association. Both should go on side by side, not just one or the other, side by side. That will facilitate the elevation or the progress of human society towards the real goal of life. Both the yajna has to be formed and society has to be the sacrifice. Acts of, charity, sacrifice, etc. should never be given up. They just have to be connected to the Lord in such a way that everyone benefits. So yes, there's truth in it, and your certain tendencies will remain. You have all your inclinations, nothing wrong with that. You may be inclined towards something. In Vedic society they would find out very early by watching a young child. The child would not go to a school where, they're made to do left, right, this, and this. They would see the child before that happens and see which direction the child naturally goes in. If you see the child naturally likes to sit in the field and watch the farmers, you can understand that boy is likely to be a farmer. You get it? And if he sees, every time a saintly person comes, that boy can't leave him for a minute, you can understand that boy has Brahminical tendencies. They let, natural course dictate, not just astrology, maybe there, palmistry, all these things maybe there too. But that was the main way of understanding the boy's inclination. Life was simple then, it's not like that now, it's complicated. Very complicated. They're exposed to television, they're exposed to an education system which is motivated to gear people towards a certain direction. It's not open as much as it should be. You're surrounded with people who are always egging you on to be something more than what you really are. And then you're unhappy and fail in society, become depressed and commit suicide or go to drugs or something. Become depressed. Society is not geared in this way anymore, I'm afraid, in general. But everyone was very careful. There would be people watching out, even with marriage. They had, wasn't just astrologers, but there were people called matchmakers. They would watch the little kids when they were real kids, little kids, and see what their natural flow of attraction to each other. They could see. They had this intuition to see that this boy and this girl have, perhaps from a previous life, have an attraction for each other. Everything was very scientifically done for the benefit of everyone. They really cared about people's welfare. We look down on it as an uncivilized, barbaric, horrible thing. It's like children getting married at 5 years old. This is disgusting, people will say. This is absolutely disgusting. Thank God it's not like that anymore. Well, I would agree with that. Both for the boys and the girls, if they're married young. First of all, the girl never thinks of another boy in her whole life. There's no question of divorce. And the boy is completely satisfied. But now they have to, because they can't marry till they're 18, so they're so frustrated, they're shopping around and having illicit sex with everything they can get their hands on. Not in every case, of course not, but regularly this goes on. And the girls are not married, they're 38 years old, they're still not married. They've got careers, nobody wants to marry them because they're too educated, they want this and that and the other. There's no simplicity left anymore. It's so complicated. The society had only one goal, back home, back to Godhead. You're not a man, you're not a woman. Who cares about all these things in reality? Play one's part designated by the Lord. For Krishna's pleasure, one can progress in the real purpose of life. Otherwise it's very complicated. Lord Chaitanya, of course, the Lord knows that, therefore that's why the Sankirtan movement is so absolutely required. No matter what position we're in, chant Hare Krishna. Try to cultivate pure devotion service. There's no structural support anymore. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai, Gaur Premanandi, Hari Bol. Okay, I guess the wedding is about to begin. For those who are attending, you better get there quick. Fill your tanks. Ananda Vrindavan. Are you staying on the mainland or on the island?
On the island.
So you just came